The clink of Marcus's expensive watch against his crystal whiskey glass was the only sound in their meticulously decorated living room. Outside, the Port Harcourt evening hummed with life, a stark contrast to the suffocating silence within their apartment, an apartment Elena had painstakingly decorated on a budget, trying to make it feel like the luxurious life Marcus craved. Elena sat opposite him, hands clenched in her lap, the fabric of her simple cotton dress suddenly feeling coarse and inadequate. She'd been waiting for him to come home, a simple dinner cooling on the table, hoping for a conversation, a connection, anything to bridge the widening gulf between them. Instead, he'd walked in, poured himself a drink, and finally, after an agonizing 10 minutes, looked at her. Not at her, really, more like through her. Elena, he began, his voice smooth, practiced, like he was closing a business deal. We need to talk. Her heart plummeted. She knew this tone. It was the precursor to bad news, usually about a deal falling through or a social event he deemed beneath him. But this felt different, colder, final. Okay, Marcus, she managed, her voice barely a whisper. What is it? He took a slow sip of his whiskey, swirling the amber liquid. This isn't working anymore. What isn't working? She asked, though a sickening dread was already coiling in her stomach. Us. Our marriage. Let's be realistic, Elena. He leaned forward slightly, his expression a careful blend of pity and impatience. We want different things. I'm moving up in the world. I have ambitions, goals. I need support. The right kind of support. The right kind. She felt a flush creep up her neck. I support you, Marcus. I always have. I work my job. I manage the house. I listen when you talk about work. He waved a dismissive hand, cutting her off. That's not what I mean, and you know it. It's about presence, status, connections. Look around you, Elena. He gestured vaguely at their apartment, the one she tried so hard to make beautiful. This is nice, comfortable, but it's not the world I'm moving into. The people I need to associate with, the circles I need to be in, they expect a certain standard. The implication hung heavy in the air. She wasn't up to standard. So what are you saying? Her voice trembled now. Are you saying I'm not good enough for your new world? I'm saying we're on different paths, he corrected, avoiding a direct answer. I need someone who understands the demands of my life, someone who can navigate those circles with ease, someone with more to offer. He paused, letting the cruelty land. Frankly, Elena, your lack of ambition, this contentment with this, he gestured around again. It's holding me back. Tears welled in her eyes, hot and stinging. Holding you back. I thought we were building a life together. I thought you loved me. Love isn't always enough, he said, his gaze finally meeting hers, but devoid of warmth. It was chillingly pragmatic. I met someone, Clarissa. Her father is on the board of Petrocorp. You understand, don't you? It's a strategic move. Strategic. He called destroying their marriage, their vows, a strategic move. The casual cruelty of it stole her breath. Clarissa. Elena had seen her at company events. Glossy hair, designer clothes, an air of effortless wealth. Everything Elena wasn't. So, you're leaving me? The words felt like shards of glass in her throat. For her? Because her father can help your career. It's more complicated than that, he began, but Elena shook her head, a single tear finally escaping, tracing a cold path down her cheek. No, it's not, she choked out. It's simple. You think I'm poor. You think I'm dragging you down. You're ashamed of me. Marcus sighed, standing up, adjusting the cuffs of his bespoke shirt. He looked down at her, his face set. I'm sorry it has to be this way, Elena. Truly. But I can't afford to be sentimental. My future depends on this. He picked up a sleek leather briefcase from beside the sofa. I'll have my lawyer contact yours. We'll make this quick and clean. It's better for everyone. He didn't wait for a response. He simply walked to the door, the expensive click of his shoes echoing on the polished floor. He paused, hand on the doorknob, but didn't turn around. "Try to understand, Elena," he said, his voice distant. "Some people are meant for bigger things. And some, well, some just aren't." And then he was gone. The door clicked shut, leaving Elena alone in the suffocating silence, the smell of cooling dinner mingling with the ghost of his expensive cologne. The vow shattered. Her life decimated by his ambition and her perceived lack of worth. The word echoed in the empty room. Poor. The apartment felt alien, hostile. Every object screamed Marcus. The minimalist sofa he'd chosen, the abstract art he'd insisted upon, even the scent of his ridiculously priced aftershave that seemed to linger in the air vents. Elena couldn't breathe. Grabbing her worn handbag and keys, she fled, stumbling out into the humid Port Harcourt evening. She didn't know where she was going, just walking, block after block, the city lights blurring through her tears. The vibrant street life, usually a source of comfort and energy, felt jarring, intrusive. Horns blared, vendors called out, music spilled from open doorways. A world moving on while hers had just imploded. Eventually, her legs aching, her mind numb, she found herself in Isaac Park. The relative quiet under the sprawling trees offered a fragile sanctuary. She sank onto a weathered wooden bench, the cool metal frame a small shock against her skin. Pulling her knees to her chest, she finally let the sobs rack her body, the raw, ugly sounds muffled by the rustling leaves and distant city hum. Lack of ambition. Holding me back. Someone with more to offer. Poor. His words played on a cruel loop in her mind, each phrase a fresh stab to her already bleeding heart. 5 years. 5 years she had dedicated to him, to them. She'd worked a steady, if unglamorous job as an administrative assistant to help pay the bills while he pursued his high-flying career in finance. She'd celebrated his promotions, soothed his anxieties, believed in his dreams, even when they seemed to leave less and less room for her own. She remembered their early days, stolen moments, shared laughter, dreams whispered in the dark. He hadn't seemed to mind her simple background then. He'd called her grounded, real, a breath of fresh air compared to the social climbers he encountered at work. When had that changed? When had her steadiness become stagnation in his eyes? When had her contentment become a liability? Maybe the signs had been there all along, subtle shifts she'd ignored or explained away. The increasing frequency of solo appearances at corporate events. You wouldn't enjoy it, darling, terribly dull. The casual dismissal of her friends. A bit ordinary, don't you think? The growing obsession with luxury brands and status symbols. He hadn't just been climbing the corporate ladder. He'd been actively trying to shed his past, and apparently that included her. A fresh wave of pain washed over her. It wasn't just the loss of the marriage, the betrayal by the man she loved. It was the crushing weight of his judgment, the implication that she was fundamentally lacking, inherently less than. He hadn't just left her. He had branded her inadequate. Poor, not just in finances, though that was true compared to his new circles, but poor in spirit, poor in ambition, poor in worth. She wiped furiously at her tears with the back of her hand. Had she really been content? Maybe. She enjoyed her simple life, her small circle of loyal friends, the satisfaction of a job done well, even if it wasn't prestigious. Was that so wrong? Did everyone have to chase relentless ambition, sacrificing everything and everyone at the altar of success? He'd made her feel small, insignificant, like a piece of furniture he no longer had use for, easily discarded for a newer, shinier model. Clarissa, with her Petrocorp connections. It was all so transactional, so cold. Was that what love meant in his world? A stepping stone? Hours passed. The park grew quieter, as the night deepened. The moon cast long shadows through the trees. Elena's sobs subsided into a hollow ache, a profound emptiness. She felt utterly adrift, stripped bare not just of her husband, but of her own self-worth, which he had so casually dismantled. What now? Go back to the empty apartment, call her parents, and break their hearts? Crawl into bed and disappear? She looked up at the vast, indifferent sky. A tiny spark of defiance flickered within the overwhelming despair. He thought she was nothing? He thought she'd amount to nothing without him? Maybe he was wrong. The thought was fragile, almost laughable in her current state, but it was there. He didn't get to define her. His ambition didn't get to erase her value. She didn't know how, but she wouldn't let this break her. She wouldn't become the footnote in his success story that he clearly expected her to be. Wiping the last tear from her cheek, Elena slowly stood up on shaky legs. The path ahead was terrifyingly unclear, shrouded in fog, but staying here, drowning in his assessment of her, was not an option. She had to move forward, even if she didn't know where she was going. One step, then another, away from the bench, away from the ghost of his words, towards an unknown future. The next few days passed in a blur of numb routine and administrative nightmares. Elena moved out of the apartment she'd shared with Marcus, packing her life into cardboard boxes with trembling hands. Each item, a chipped mug they'd bought on a weekend trip, a framed photo from their wedding, a book he'd given her, felt like a tiny betrayal. She found a small, basic flat in a less fashionable part of Port Harcourt, the kind Marcus would have sneered at. It was all she could afford now, her savings depleted by the deposit and first month's rent. Her friends rallied around her. Maria brought over comforting jollof rice and stayed late just listening. Chitty helped her move the heavy boxes, cracking terrible jokes to try and make her smile. Their kindness was a balm, but the deep wound inflicted by Marcus remained raw. She went through the motions at work, filing papers and answering phones, her mind miles away, replaying his final words, dissecting every nuance of his cold dismissal. Sleep offered little respite, filled with anxious dreams and the phantom feeling of his presence beside her. She felt adrift, anchorless. The future stretched before her, a vast, terrifying blank canvas. It was a Tuesday afternoon, about a week after she'd moved into her new place, that the letter arrived. It stood out starkly from the usual junk mail and bills stuffed into her small mailbox, a thick, cream-colored envelope made of expensive, heavy paper. There was no return address, only an embossed crest in the top left corner. An intricate design featuring a stylized S intertwined with what looked like an eagle. The address was impeccably typed. Ms. Elena Chiquiti, Flat 3B, 18 Okoro Street, Romeo Okoro, Port Harcourt, Rivers State. Chiquiti, her maiden name. She hadn't used it regularly in years. How strange. Her brow furrowed. Who would be sending her mail like this? It looked incredibly official, almost intimidatingly so. Maybe something work-related, but why to her home address and under her maiden name? With a growing sense of unease, mixed with curiosity, Elena carried the envelope upstairs to her sparsely furnished flat. She sat on the edge of her second-hand sofa, turning the heavy envelope over in her hands. The paper felt luxurious beneath her fingertips, a world away from her current reality. She carefully slit it open with a kitchen knife, her heart beating a little faster than usual. Inside was a single sheet of matching cream paper, folded precisely in 3. The letterhead bore the same crest and the name of a law firm. Sterling, Thorne and Associates, Legal Counsel. Below that, an address in Ikoyi, Lagos, one of the most affluent areas in the country. Sterling, Thorne and Associates. The name meant nothing to her. She didn't know any lawyers, certainly not from a prestigious Lagos firm. She unfolded the letter, her eyes scanning the formal, typewritten text. Sterling, Thorne and Associates. Legal counsel. 15 Kingsway Road, Ikoyi, Lagos. Date: April 20th, 2025. Subject: urgent matter regarding the estate of Mr. Arthur Sterling. Dear Ms. Chikwudi, we are writing to you on behalf of the estate of the late Mr. Arthur Sterling. It has come to our attention, following the execution of Mr. Sterling's final will and testament, that you are named as a significant beneficiary. Due to the sensitive and substantial nature of this matter, we request your presence at our offices in Lagos at your earliest possible convenience to discuss the details further. We understand this news may come as a surprise, and we are prepared to facilitate your travel arrangements should you require assistance. Please contact our office at the number listed below within 7 business days to schedule an appointment with Mr. Adekunle Thorne, Senior Partner. Kindly refer to file reference AS/ET/774. We assure you of our utmost discretion and look forward to hearing from you soon. Sincerely, signature, Adekunle Thorne, Senior Partner, Sterling, Thorne and Associates. Elena read the letter once, then twice, then a third time, her mind struggling to process the words. Arthur Sterling. The name echoed faintly, distantly, but she couldn't place it. Estate. Beneficiary? Significant beneficiary? It had to be a mistake. A cruel prank. Some kind of elaborate scam. She didn't know anyone named Arthur Sterling, and the idea of being a significant beneficiary of anyone's estate, let alone someone apparently wealthy enough to retain a top Lagos law firm, was utterly preposterous. She was Elena Chikwudi. The administrative assistant Marcus had deemed too poor and unambitious. People like her didn't inherit significant estates. She checked the name and address again. Ms. Elena Chikwudi, flat 3B, 18 Okoro Street. It was definitely for her. But why? Who was Arthur Sterling? And why would he name her a complete stranger in his will? Her mind raced. Could it be a distant relative she'd never heard of? Her family wasn't large, and certainly not wealthy. Her parents were retired teachers living modestly in Enugu. There were no secret millionaires hiding in their family tree, as far as she knew. The phrase, "facilitate your travel arrangements," jumped out at her. This wasn't some minor bequest, a sentimental keepsake. This implied something substantial enough to warrant a trip to Lagos, handled by a senior partner. A cold dread washed over her, replacing the initial confusion. What if it was a scam? What if she called the number, gave her details, and ended up losing what little money she had left? Marcus's voice echoed in her head, mocking her gullibility. Always too trusting, Elena. But the quality of the paper, the embossed crest, the formal language, it felt undeniably real. Too elaborate for a typical scam. Sterling, Thorne and Associates. She could probably look them up online. Hesitantly, she reached for her cheap laptop. The one Marcus had always complained was too slow. She typed the law firm's name into the search bar. The results loaded instantly. A sleek, professional website appeared, listing practice areas, partner profiles, and the same Ikoyi address. Mr. Adekunle Thorne was listed prominently, his biography detailing decades of experience in corporate law and estate planning. It was a legitimate, high-profile firm. This wasn't a scam, which left only the baffling question: who was Arthur Sterling, and why was she in his will? The mysterious letter lay on her coffee table, a heavy, cream-colored enigma that promised something. She didn't know if it was good or bad, a lifeline or another complication in her already shattered life. But one thing was certain: she couldn't ignore it. The phone felt unnaturally heavy in Elena's hand. For 2 days, the letter had sat on her small table, a silent, imposing presence. She picked it up countless times, reread the formal words, traced the embossed crest, her mind a whirlwind of speculation, anxiety, and disbelief. Contacting a high-powered Lagos law firm felt like stepping into a different universe, one she didn't belong in. What would she even say? Hello, I received your mysterious letter about a dead rich person I've never heard of. But the alternative, doing nothing, letting the 7 days lapse, felt like succumbing to the very inertia Marcus had accused her of. Whatever this was, she needed to know. Taking a deep breath, steeling herself, she dialed the number provided. Sterling Thorne and Associates, how may I direct your call? The receptionist's voice was crisp, professional, and unmistakably Lagosian. Hello, Elena began, her voice tighter than she intended. My name is Elena Chiquiti. I'm calling regarding a letter I received about, the estate of Mr. Arthur Sterling. The reference is AS/ET/774. There was a brief pause, the soft clicking of keyboard keys. Yes, Miss Chiquiti. Mr. Thorne is expecting your call. Please hold while I connect you. Elena's knuckles were white where she gripped the phone. Expecting her call? This felt surreal. A moment later, a deep, calm voice came on the line. Miss Chiquiti, Adekunle Thorne speaking. Thank you for calling us back so promptly. Mr. Thorne, Elena managed, trying to sound composed. I received your letter. To be honest, I'm very confused. I don't believe I know anyone named Arthur Sterling. I understand this must be unexpected, Mr. Thorne said kindly. His voice was reassuring, devoid of judgment. Perhaps it would be best if we discussed this in person. As mentioned in the letter, the details are quite significant. Are you able to travel to Lagos? We can arrange everything, of course. Flights, accommodation. Travel to Lagos. Elena hesitated. It seemed like such a huge step based on nothing she understood. Could you perhaps tell me just who Arthur Sterling was and why he would possibly name me in his will? There was a thoughtful pause on the other end. Miss Chiquiti, Arthur Sterling was your maternal grandfather. Elena froze. The world seemed to tilt slightly. Grandfather. The word felt foreign, impossible. No, that can't be right. My mother's parents passed away long before I was born. That's what she always told me. The circumstances are complex, Mr. Thorne said carefully. Arthur Sterling and your late mother, Ngozi, were estranged for many, many years. It seems she chose not to speak of him. However, extensive research and documentation confirm your lineage beyond any doubt. You are his granddaughter, Elena, and following his recent passing, you are his sole heir. Sole heir. The words hung in the air, heavy and unbelievable. Grandfather. A grandfather she never knew existed. A wealthy grandfather. Judging by this law firm. Estranged? Elena whispered, her mind reeling. My mother, she never said a word. Not one. Why? That is a question I'm afraid I cannot answer definitively, Mr. Thorne replied gently. Family histories can be complicated, filled with pain and secrets. What I can tell you is that Mr. Sterling never stopped thinking about his daughter or the possibility of grandchildren. He spent considerable resources trying to locate Ngozi over the years without success until shortly before his passing, when new information came to light, leading us to you after his death. Elena sank back onto the sofa, overwhelmed. Her mother, Ngozi, had passed away 5 years ago from a sudden illness. She had been a quiet, gentle woman devoted to Elena and her husband. Elena had always sensed a carefully guarded sadness about her mother's past, particularly regarding her family, but she had respected her silence, assuming it was grief over parents lost too soon. But estrangement, a secret, wealthy father her mother never acknowledged, It cast her memories of her mother in a completely new, confusing light. Sole heir to what exactly? Elena asked, her voice trembling slightly. This was too much. Arthur Sterling was the founder and majority shareholder of Sterling Industries, Mr. Thorne stated, his tone matter-of-fact, as if discussing the weather. Sterling Industries. Elena frowned. The name sounded vaguely familiar. She thought she might have seen it in the business pages of newspapers Marcus sometimes left lying around. A tech company or manufacturing. I don't really know what Sterling Industries is, she admitted, feeling foolish. Mr. Thorne cleared his throat. Sterling Industries is one of the largest and most diversified technology and industrial conglomerates in West Africa, Ms. Chiquiti, with significant holdings in telecommunications, energy solutions, and advanced manufacturing. Its estimated value is substantial. He paused. Arthur Sterling was by any measure an exceptionally wealthy man, and as his sole heir, his entire estate, including his controlling interest in the company, passes to you. Elena's head spun. Conglomerate. Holdings. Controlling interest. These were words from Marcus's world, not hers. And the scale, exceptionally wealthy. It was incomprehensible. Just days ago, she was weeping on a park bench, branded poor and worthless by her departing husband. Now, this lawyer was telling her she was the sole heir to a fortune, to an entire industrial conglomerate. This is impossible, she stammered. There must be a mistake. There is no mistake, Miss Chiquiti, Mr. Thorne assured her calmly. We have birth certificates, legal documents, DNA confirmations conducted posthumously as per Mr. Sterling's instructions should an heir be located. You are Elena Ngozi Chiquiti, daughter of Ngozi Sterling Chiquiti, granddaughter of Arthur Sterling. The inheritance is yours. Silence stretched down the phone line, filled only by the frantic pounding of Elena's own heart. A grandfather, an empire, an inheritance beyond imagining. It wasn't just a letter anymore. It was a tidal wave, poised to crash down and change her life utterly and irrevocably. Miss Chiquiti. Mr. Thorne's voice brought her back. Shall we proceed with arranging your visit to Lagos? Swallowing hard, Elena found her voice. Yes, she said, the word barely audible but firm. Yes, please. After the call with Mr. Thorne, Elena felt like she was walking through a dream, or perhaps someone else's life. She moved automatically, agreeing to flight details emailed by the law firm's secretary, confirming a hotel booking in Ikoyi, a hotel whose nightly rate was more than her weekly salary. It all felt profoundly unreal. Sole heir. Sterling Industries. Grandfather. She tried to focus on the practicalities, packing a small bag. Informing her bewildered boss she needed a few days off for an urgent family matter, a statement that felt both true and entirely false, arranging for Maria to water her single, struggling houseplant. But underneath the mundane tasks, her mind churned relentlessly. Arthur Sterling, her grandfather. Why had her mother never spoken of him? Ngozi had been loving, kind, but also intensely private about her life before she met Elena's father. Elena had always assumed it was just her quiet nature, perhaps tinged with sadness over losing her parents young. But this suggested something deeper. A deliberate severing of ties. A secret kept for decades. Sitting on her lumpy sofa amidst half-packed belongings, Elena closed her eyes, trying to dredge up any memory, any clue, however small. She pictured her mother's face, her gentle smile, the way she would hum softly while cooking. Ngozi had loved telling Elena stories, but always about Elena's father's family or funny anecdotes from her own school days, or folk tales she remembered from her mother. Never about her father. When Elena had asked, maybe once or twice as a curious child, Ngozi had simply said, "He passed away when I was very young, my love. It's too sad to talk about." And Elena, sensing the finality in her tone, hadn't pushed. But now, was that story a complete fabrication or a half-truth twisted to hide a painful reality? Estranged. Mr. Thorne's word echoed. What could have happened to cause such a profound rift between a father and daughter? A rift so deep Ngozi chose to erase him entirely from her life and from her own daughters? Elena strained her memory, pushing past the easy recollections. Think, was there anything, any slip of the tongue, any old photograph tucked away, any name mentioned in passing, and then a flicker, faint, hazy, like a half-forgotten dream. She must have been very young, maybe 6 or 7. She'd been looking through her mother's old jewelry box, a simple wooden thing filled mostly with costume pieces. Tucked beneath a string of faux pearls, she'd found a small, tarnished silver locket. It was empty. She'd asked her mother about it. Ngozi had snatched it back quickly, her usual calm momentarily ruffled. "Oh, that's nothing, Elena. Just an old thing." "Who gave it to you, Mama?" Little Elena had persisted. Ngozi had hesitated, her gaze distant for a moment. "It was from before. A long time ago." Then, almost under her breath, so quietly Elena wasn't sure she'd heard it right, she'd murmured a name. A name that sounded like Sterling. At the time, the name meant nothing. Elena had quickly forgotten the incident, distracted by some other childhood fascination. But now, decades later, the memory surfaced with startling clarity. The hushed tone, the flicker of something, sadness, resentment, in her mother's eyes. The way she'd quickly changed the subject. Sterling. Had that been it? Had her mother, in an unguarded moment, whispered the name of the father she'd tried so hard to forget? It wasn't much. A half-heard name attached to an empty locket, but combined with Mr. Thorne's revelations, it felt significant. A tiny crack in the wall of silence her mother had built around her past. Why the secrecy? Why the estrangement? Was Arthur Sterling a cruel man? Had he disapproved of Elena's father? Had there been a terrible argument? Or was it something else entirely? The question swirled, unanswerable for now. Elena looked around her tiny, bare flat. This was her life. Simple, quiet, recently shattered. And now, out of nowhere, came the ghost of a grandfather, the whisper of a name, and the impossible promise of an empire. It was terrifying. It was overwhelming. But amidst the fear and confusion, something else stirred. A fierce curiosity. A need to understand the mother she thought she knew. A need to uncover the truth behind the name Sterling. And maybe, just maybe, a need to discover who she was beyond the reflection Marcus had shown her, beyond the confines of the life she had known. Lagos awaited, and with it, perhaps, the answers. The flight from Port Harcourt to Lagos was a blur. Elena stared out the window at the clouds, her mind a chaotic landscape of disbelief, anxiety, and a strange budding curiosity. A car arranged by the law firm. A sleek, black Mercedes that cost more than her annual salary met her at Murtala Muhammad Airport. The driver, polite and silent, navigated the infamous Lagos traffic, eventually pulling up outside a gleaming glass and steel tower on Kingsway Road. Ikoyi. The sign near the entrance read, Sterling, Thorne and Associates. Taking a deep breath, Elena smoothed down her best dress, a simple navy blue sheath that suddenly felt woefully inadequate. This was it, the moment of truth. The lobby was hushed, opulent, all polished marble, expensive art and cool, conditioned air. A receptionist, looking impossibly chic, directed her to the top floor. The elevator ascended smoothly, silently, and opened onto another level of quiet luxury. A moment later, she was being ushered into a large corner office with panoramic views of the Lagos skyline. Adekunle Thorne rose from behind a massive mahogany desk to greet her. He was older than she'd expected, perhaps in his late 60s, with kind eyes behind stylish glasses, a neatly trimmed gray beard, and an aura of calm authority. He wore a traditional agbada, impeccably tailored. "Ms. Chakwoody, welcome," he said, extending a hand. His handshake was firm and warm. "Please sit down. Can I offer you anything? Water? Tea?" "Water would be lovely. Thank you." Elena managed, sinking into a plush leather chair opposite his desk. Her hands felt clammy. Mr. Thorne poured her a glass from a crystal carafe, his movements unhurried. He sat back down, regarding her with a gentle, assessing gaze. "I imagine you have many questions," he began. "That's an understatement, Mr. Thorne," Elena replied, finding a sliver of her usual directness. "Everything you told me on the phone, it's hard to believe." "Understandable," he nodded. "Let me try to provide some clarity. As I mentioned, Arthur Sterling was your maternal grandfather. He passed away 3 weeks ago after a brief illness. He was 85. He slid a file across the desk towards her. "This contains copies of the relevant documents confirming your identity and lineage, birth certificates, your mother's, yours, and the results of the genealogical research and DNA confirmation." Elena hesitantly opened the file. Seeing her name, her mother's name, Ngozi Sterling Chakwoody, linked directly to Arthur Sterling, felt like staring at proof of an alternate reality. "My mother, Ngozi, she left home when she was quite young, around 19, Mr. Thorne continued softly. "There was a significant disagreement with Arthur. Details are scarce, but it seems it concerned her wish to marry your father, a man Arthur apparently disapproved of, considering him unsuitable." Elena's heart clenched. So, her kind, unassuming father, the retired teacher, was the cause of the rift. Arthur could be a formidable man, Mr. Thorne said diplomatically. Proud, driven, and accustomed to getting his way. He built Sterling Industries from practically nothing. You see, he expected absolute loyalty and obedience, even from his family. When Ngozi defied him to marry the man she loved, he reacted harshly. Words were exchanged that could not be taken back. She left, cut off contact, and apparently never looked back. Tears pricked Elena's eyes. She pictured her young mother, choosing love over her father's wealth and approval, facing his formidable anger. It painted a picture of quiet strength she hadn't fully appreciated. Arthur regretted his actions almost immediately. Mr. Thorne went on, his voice filled with sympathy. He spent years trying to find her, using private investigators, searching records, but Ngozi had covered her tracks well. She changed her name slightly, moved frequently in the early years with your father. It wasn't until recently, through advanced digital forensics and genealogical tracing, that our investigators finally located you, sadly only after Arthur's passing. So he wanted to reconcile? Elena asked, her voice thick. Desperately, Mr. Thorne confirmed. He spoke of it often in his later years. His greatest regret was losing his daughter. Finding you, his granddaughter, was the focus of his efforts before he died. He amended his will significantly about 6 months ago, ensuring that if Ngozi was deceased, but had that issue, you would inherit everything. He paused, letting the weight of this sink in, which brings us to the will itself. He picked up a thick, bound document from his desk. This is the final will and testament of Arthur Aloysius Sterling. Shall I read the relevant clauses? Elena nodded, mutely bracing herself. Mr. Thorne cleared his throat and began to read in a formal, measured tone. The legal language was dense, but the core message was unmistakable. After outlining a few minor bequests to long-serving staff and charities, the will stated clearly, all the remainder of my estate, real and personal, including all properties, assets, investments, holdings, and my controlling shares in Sterling Industries plc, I give, devise, and bequeath absolutely and solely to my granddaughter, Elena Ngozi Chikwudi, daughter of my late beloved daughter, Ngozi Sterling Chikwudi. Should the aforementioned Elena Ngozi Chikwudi predecease me without issue, then the estate shall be liquidated and distributed amongst the charitable foundations listed in Appendix C. It went on, detailing the transfer of shares, the establishment of trusts, the appointment of Mr. Thorne himself as executor and interim advisor. Elena listened, numb. Controlling shares. Sterling Industries plc. It wasn't just money. It was everything. An empire built by a grandfather she never knew, passed down because of his regret and her mother's long-ago defiance. When Mr. Thorne finished reading the core clauses of the will, a heavy silence settled in the office. Elena stared blankly at the intricate patterns on the mahogany desk, her mind struggling to grasp the sheer magnitude of what she'd just heard. Sole heir, controlling interest. The phrases echoed, abstract and overwhelming. Mr. Thorne allowed her a moment, then leaned forward slightly, his expression serious but kind. Miss Chikwudi, Elena, I know this is a tremendous amount to absorb. The legal formalities are complex, but the essence is simple. You are now the owner of Sterling Industries and its associated assets. Elena finally looked up, her eyes wide. Owner? But I don't know anything about conglomerates, or telecommunications, or any of it. I'm an administrative assistant. The words sounded absurd even as she said them. Arthur was aware that his heir might not have a background in business. Mr. Thorne reassured her. His will makes provisions. There are structures in place, experienced executives who run the day-to-day operations. And I, as executor, and per his instructions, am here to guide you, to advise you, for as long as you require. But the value, Elena stammered, almost afraid to ask. You said Sterling Industries is substantial. What does that actually mean? Mr. Thorne hesitated for a fraction of a second, as if choosing his words carefully. He picked up another document, a summary financial statement prepared by the company's auditors. Sterling Industries plc is a publicly listed company on the Nigerian Stock Exchange, although the Sterling Family Trust retained a 70% controlling stake, which now passes to you, he explained. It has diverse divisions: Sterling Telecom, Sterling Energy, Sterling Manufacturing Solutions. It employs over 15,000 people across West Africa. Its assets include major real estate holdings, a significant investment portfolio, and cutting-edge technological patents. He paused, looking directly at her. Based on current market capitalization, independent valuations of private assets, and liquid holdings, the conservative net estimated value of the estate you have inherited, Elena, is approximately, he took a breath, $4.7 billion US. $4.7 billion. The number hit Elena like a physical force. She felt the blood drain from her face. Her ears started ringing. Billion? Not million. Billion. With a B. It wasn't just substantial, it was astronomical. Incomprehensible. She thought of her tiny flat in Rumuokoro. She thought of the careful budget she lived on, the worry about making rent after Marcus left. She thought of Marcus sneering about her lack of status, calling her poor. $4.7 billion. A hysterical giggle escaped her lips, sharp and unexpected in the quiet office. It quickly turned into a choked sob. Tears started streaming down her face, not from sadness this time, but from sheer, overwhelming shock. Mr. Thorne discreetly pushed a box of tissues across the desk. It's perfectly understandable to be overwhelmed, Elena, he said softly. It is a life-altering sum. Life-altering. Elena laughed wetly, wiping her eyes. Mr. Thorne, I don't even know how many zeros are in a billion. He smiled gently. 9, after the initial figure. 9 zeros. For billion, 700 million. It was a number so large it felt meaningless, detached from reality. What did one even do with that much money? It wasn't just wealth. It was power on a scale she couldn't fathom. The power to do anything. The implications crashed down on her. She wasn't just Elena Chiquiti, the jilted wife, the admin assistant, anymore. She was Elena Sterling Chiquiti, the billionaire heiress, the owner of a vast corporation, the woman who held the fate of thousands of employees, of a legacy built by a formidable stranger who was her grandfather. The shock began to recede, slightly, replaced by a dizzying vertigo. This wasn't just about money. This was about responsibility, expectation, a world she was utterly unprepared for. I need a minute, she whispered, pressing her fingers to her temples. Of course, Mr. Thorne said kindly. Take all the time you need. There is no rush. This is just the beginning. Just the beginning. The thought was both terrifying and, somewhere deep beneath the shock, strangely exhilarating. Her life had been irrevocably changed. The path ahead was unknown, daunting, but it was undeniably hers. And it was paved not with pennies, but with billions. After allowing Elena time to compose herself, offering more water and patient silence, Mr. Thorne suggested the next step. Perhaps, he said gently, it would be helpful for you to see Sterling Tower, to get a feel for the heart of the company. Elena, still reeling but determined not to crumble, agreed. The idea was daunting, but hiding in the lawyer's office wouldn't change her new reality. She needed to face it. Another short drive in the Mercedes, this time deeper into the bustling commercial heart of Lagos Island, brought them to a towering skyscraper that dominated the skyline. It was a modern marvel of gleaming blue glass and steel, soaring at least 40 stories into the sky. At the base, a large, polished granite sign bore the name, Sterling Tower. The intertwined St. Eagle crest, the same one from the letterhead, was subtly etched into the glass doors. This wasn't just an office building. It was a statement, a monument to power and success. It radiated wealth and influence, a physical embodiment of the billions Mr. Thorne had spoken of. Elena felt impossibly small standing before it. Mr. Thorne led her through the revolving doors into a vast, cathedral-like lobby. The floors were shimmering black marble, the walls paneled in rich, dark wood interspersed with contemporary Nigerian art. A huge, multi-screen display showcased Sterling Industries' various divisions, sleek phones, wind turbines turning against a blue sky, complex machinery whirring in clean factories. People moved with quiet purpose, men and women in sharp suits, carrying briefcases, talking softly into headsets. The air buzzed with controlled energy. Impressive, isn't it? Mr. Thorne murmured beside her. Arthur built this headquarters 10 years ago. State of the art. Elena could only nod, speechless. This place felt like another planet compared to the cramped, functional office where she worked back in Port Harcourt. This was the nerve center of her grandfather's empire. Her empire. She corrected herself, the thought still feeling alien. As they approached the security desk, the guard straightened, their eyes flicking towards Mr. Thorne with recognition and respect. He murmured Elena's name, and the head guard nodded, pressing a button. A discreet gate slid open, granting them access to a private elevator bank. These elevators go directly to the executive floors, Mr. Thorne explained as they stepped inside the plush, wood-paneled car. The elevator ascended rapidly, the floors flashing by. Elena's stomach did a nervous flip. What awaited her upstairs? Would people stare? Would they know who she was? The doors opened silently onto the 38th floor. The atmosphere here was even more hushed, the carpets thicker, the lighting softer. They stepped out into a wide reception area, staffed by two impeccably dressed receptionists who rose immediately upon seeing Mr. Thorne. "Mr. Thorne, welcome," one said smoothly. Her eyes flickered curiously towards Elena, but her expression remained professionally neutral. "Good morning, Funk," Mr. Thorne replied warmly. "This is Ms. Elena Chakwoody. She'll be spending some time with us." He didn't elaborate, didn't give her a title, leaving her status ambiguous for now. He guided Elena down a wide corridor lined with closed doors of frosted glass. "These are the primary executive offices," he explained quietly. "The chief operating officer, chief financial officer, heads of the main divisions." Elena glanced at the names etched discreetly beside the doors. Names she didn't recognize, but who were apparently key figures in the company she now owned. People whose careers, whose livelihoods were indirectly in her hands. The weight of responsibility felt heavier with each step. Mr. Thorne stopped outside a set of imposing double doors at the very end of the corridor. And this was Arthur's office. "Your office now." He pushed the doors open. Elena gasped. The office was enormous, occupying the entire corner of the building. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered breathtaking, panoramic views of Lagos, stretching out to the lagoon and the Atlantic Ocean beyond. The furniture was luxurious but tasteful, a massive, modern desk, a comfortable seating area with leather sofas, built-in bookshelves filled with leather-bound volumes and industry awards. It was the office of a titan, a man who commanded empires from this very spot. And it was hers. She walked slowly towards the windows, drawn by the view. The city spread out below her like a map, vibrant and teeming with life. From up here, the infamous traffic jams looked like streams of colorful confetti. It was a perspective of power, of detachment, yet also of connection to the sprawling metropolis. This was Arthur Sterling's world, and somehow, impossibly, it was now hers to navigate. This tower, this company, this legacy, it was the first tangible piece of the inheritance, and its sheer scale was both terrifying and awe-inspiring. Mr. Thorne didn't push Elena immediately into formal introductions. He understood the need for acclimatization. For the next couple of days, he acted as her guide and buffer, arranging brief, informal meetings with key senior executives, one or two at a time, usually in the relative neutrality of the main boardroom rather than her intimidating new office. The boardroom itself was another exercise in corporate power, a long, polished table capable of seating 30, surrounded by high-backed leather chairs, equipped with integrated screens and communication systems. The ever-present Sterling crest was subtly woven into the carpet. The executives Elena met were, without exception, polished, intelligent, and wary. They were mostly men, older than her, dressed in expensive suits, their careers built within the structure Arthur Sterling had created. They greeted her with careful politeness, their eyes sharp and assessing. Mr. Thorne introduced her simply as Ms. Chakwoody, Mr. Sterling's granddaughter, and heir, letting the implications hang. She met Mr. Adebayo, the chief operating officer, a stern-faced man with decades of experience who clearly knew the company inside out. He spoke precisely about operational efficiencies and supply chains, his gaze never quite hiding his skepticism about this young, unknown woman suddenly appearing at the top. She met Mrs. Abra, the chief financial officer, sharp and analytical, who presented complex financial data with brisk confidence, though Elena caught a flicker of surprise, perhaps even pity, in her eyes when Elena admitted her lack of financial background. She met Dr. Bello, head of Sterling Energy, passionate about renewables, and Mr. Ease, head of Sterling Telecom, focused intently on market share and the upcoming 5G rollout. They were all experts in their fields, powerful figures within the Sterling empire. And Elena, she was an outsider, an anomaly, thrust into their world by the whims of a dead man's will. The conversations were stilted. Elena, acutely aware of her ignorance, mostly listened, asking tentative, basic questions, trying to absorb the flood of information about market dynamics, R&D pipelines, and strategic partnerships, concepts utterly foreign to her previous life. She could feel their scrutiny, sense the unspoken questions hanging in the air. Who is she? What does she know? Is she capable? Will she interfere? Will she sell? Outside of these formal meetings, she felt the whispers, the curious glances, as Mr. Thorne escorted her through the executive floors. She saw pairs of executives fall silent as she approached, noticed the quick, assessing looks from assistants. She wasn't paranoid. She was the elephant in the room, the unexpected variable in their carefully ordered corporate world. One afternoon, as she and Mr. Thorne waited for an elevator, she overheard snippets of conversation from two executives walking away down the corridor. No warning at all. Just appeared out of nowhere. Daughter nobody knew existed. Now this granddaughter? Admin assistant from Port Harcourt. Apparently. Can you imagine? Arthur must have been losing his mind. How long before she sells it off or runs it into the ground? The words, though not aimed directly at her, struck like tiny darts. They saw her exactly as Marcus had, inexperienced, out of her depth, perhaps even unworthy. The old feelings of inadequacy surged, fueled by her genuine lack of knowledge about this complex business world. Mr. Thorne must have sensed her distress. As the elevator doors closed, he said quietly, "Pay them no mind, Elena. Change is always unsettling. Arthur built a strong team, but they are used to his way of doing things. They are uncertain. It will take time for them to adjust and for you to find your footing." "But they're right, aren't they?" Elena murmured, staring at her reflection in the polished steel doors. "I don't belong here. I don't know what I'm doing." "You belong here because Arthur Sterling chose you to be here," Mr. Thorne countered firmly. "He didn't leave his life's work to chance. He left it to his blood, to his legacy. As for knowing what you're doing, no one expects you to understand everything overnight. Learning takes time. What matters is your willingness to learn, your intelligence, and your character. Arthur believed you would have the strength required. I believe it too." His unwavering confidence was a small anchor in her sea of doubt. He was right. She couldn't control their whispers or their skepticism, but she could control her response. She could learn. She could adapt. She wouldn't let their doubts or her own define her. The whispers might follow her, but she wouldn't let them drown her out. The whispers and the weight of expectation settled on Elena like a physical burden. She spent hours in her luxurious hotel suite, poring over the company reports Mr. Thorne provided, trying to decipher balance sheets and market projections, feeling utterly inadequate. Her simple wardrobe felt laughably out of place in the Sterling Tower environment. Even her way of speaking, her posture, felt wrong, lacking the effortless confidence of the executives she encountered. Marcus's voice echoed in her memory. Lack of ambition, contentment with this, he had judged her unfit for his world. And now, faced with the pinnacle of corporate power, she feared he might have been right. One evening, staring at her reflection in the hotel room mirror, tired eyes, plain dress, hair pulled back in its usual simple style, a wave of frustration washed over her. She couldn't change her background. She couldn't magically absorb decades of business knowledge overnight, but she could change how she presented herself. She could start looking the part, even if she didn't feel it yet. It wasn't about vanity, it was about armor. It was about signaling that she intended to occupy the space she'd inherited. The next morning, she approached Mr. Thorne with a new resolve. "Mr. Thorne," she began a little nervously, "I know this might sound superficial, but I need some help with appearances." He smiled knowingly. "Not superficial at all, Elena. Presentation matters in this world." Arthur understood that well. What do you have in mind? I need clothes, she said bluntly. Clothes that fit in here. And maybe advice on how to carry myself. Mr. Thorne nodded. Consider it done. Arthur retained the services of an excellent image consultant and stylist for executive branding some years ago. A very discreet and talented woman named Yemi. Shall I arrange an introduction? And so began Elena's transformation. Yemi was a force of nature, chic, energetic, and possessing an unerring eye for style and presence. She didn't try to turn Elena into someone else. Instead, she focused on enhancing Elena's natural features and building a wardrobe that projected quiet power and modern sophistication. There were whirlwind shopping trips to Lagos's most exclusive designer boutiques, places Elena wouldn't have dared enter weeks ago. Yemi expertly selected tailored trouser suits in sharp cuts and quality fabrics, elegant sheath dresses, crisp blouses, and understated but expensive accessories. Out went the worn-out flats, replaced by elegant heels that subtly changed Elena's posture, making her stand taller. Power isn't loud. Elena, Yemi advised during a fitting. It's in the cut, the fabric, the fit. It's in how you occupy your clothes, how you enter a room. Head up, shoulders back, purposeful stride. There were appointments with a top hairstylist who reshaped her simple cut into a sleek, professional bob that framed her face beautifully. A makeup artist showed her subtle techniques to enhance her features without looking overly made up. It wasn't just about the externals. Yemi coached her on body language, on maintaining eye contact, on modulating her voice for greater authority. They practiced introductions, handshakes, navigating business lunches. Slowly, painstakingly, Elena began to change. Looking in the mirror was like seeing a stranger, a polished, confident woman who looked like she belonged in the Sterling Tower boardroom. The clothes felt like armor, shielding her insecurities. The new hairstyle made her feel sharper, more focused. Standing taller in heels, she found herself meeting people's gazes more directly. Of course, the internal transformation was slower. The doubts didn't vanish overnight, but looking the part gave her a crucial confidence boost. When she walked into Sterling Tower now, dressed in a perfectly tailored suit, her head held high, she noticed a subtle shift in how people reacted. The curious glances were still there, but they were tinged with less skepticism, perhaps even a grudging respect. The whispers didn't stop, but they seemed less potent. She wasn't just the accidental heiress anymore. She was starting to look like the chairwoman. Now, she needed to start acting like one. The makeover wasn't just about clothes. It was about stepping into the possibility of who she could become. Armed with her new look and a growing, albeit fragile, sense of purpose, Elena continued her immersion into Sterling Industries. She spent long days with Mr. Thorne, absorbing information, asking questions, and gradually beginning to form her own opinions. She requested meetings with department heads below the C-suite level, wanting to understand the business from different perspectives. She learned about a long-standing community project Sterling Energy funded in a rural area, providing solar panels for schools and clinics. She discovered Sterling Telecom was facing criticism for its customer service response times. She found out Sterling Manufacturing was developing an innovative recycling process that was currently stalled due to budget allocation debates. The sheer volume of information was overwhelming, but patterns began to emerge. She saw the dedication of many employees, the bureaucratic hurdles, the internal politics, the constant pressure of the bottom line. One afternoon, she was reviewing the quarterly discretionary budget proposals with Mrs. Abra, the CFO. It was a dry, numbers-heavy meeting, and Elena was struggling to follow all the intricacies. Tucked away near the end of the report was a small line item, Community Solar Project, Phase 2 expansion, pending funding approval. The requested amount wasn't huge in the grand scheme of Sterling's multi-billion-dollar budget, but it had been marked as deferred. This solar project, Elena interrupted Mrs. Abra's explanation of depreciation schedules. Dr. Bello mentioned it briefly. It provides power to schools in underserved areas. Mrs. Abra looked slightly surprised by the question. Yes, Miss Chiquity. It's a CSR, corporate social responsibility, initiative. Phase 1 was completed 2 years ago. Phase 2 proposes expanding it to 3 neighboring villages. However, given the current focus on maximizing Q3 profit margins before the annual shareholder report, non-essential expenditures like this were deferred by the budget committee. Non-essential. Elena frowned. She remembered the brief conversation with Dr. Bello, head of Sterling Energy. He had spoken passionately about the project, the tangible difference it made to children's education and basic health care access in the villages. From a purely short-term financial perspective, yes, Mrs. Aber clarified, her tone neutral. Its ROI isn't directly quantifiable in the next quarter's results. Elena looked at the figure again. It was a fraction of a percent of the company's quarterly profit. Deferring it seemed wrong, short-sighted. It felt like the kind of decision made by people focused solely on numbers, forgetting the human impact. It felt like the kind of decision Arthur Sterling, the formidable builder, might have made, but perhaps not the kind the grandfather who regretted losing his daughter would want. More importantly, it wasn't the kind of decision she wanted to make. She thought of her own modest background, of the importance her teacher parents placed on education and community. She thought about the power she now held, not just financial power, but the power to influence decisions, to shape the company's direction, however slightly. Taking a deep breath, Elena looked directly at the CFO. Mrs. Abra, she said, her voice quiet but firm, surprising even herself. I understand the focus on profit margins, but I believe long-term value isn't just measured in Naira and Kobo. This project aligns with the Sterling name being associated with progress and community development. It's a relatively small amount in the context of our overall budget. She paused, meeting the CFO's surprised gaze. I want the funding for Phase 2 approved. Please reinstate it in the budget, effective immediately. There was a beat of silence. Mrs. Abra's eyebrows rose almost imperceptibly. This was unexpected. The new heiress, the quiet admin assistant from Port Harcourt, was countermanding a committee decision, making an executive order based on CSR? But Elena didn't waver. She held the CFO's gaze, her posture straight, channeling the confidence Yemi had coached her on. After a moment, Mrs. Abra gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod. As you wish, Miss Chiquity. I will amend the budget allocation and inform Dr. Bello. Thank you, Mrs. Abra. Elena said simply, trying to keep the tremor of adrenaline out of her voice. As the CFO gathered her papers, Elena felt a surge of something unfamiliar. A thrill. It wasn't about defying anyone. It was about making a choice, asserting a value, using the power she held for something she believed in, however small. She had looked at the machinery of the empire and pulled a lever. It was just one small project, one line item in a vast budget. But it was her decision, her first real taste of power. And it felt surprisingly good. Back in Port Harcourt, Marcus swirled the expensive cognac in his glass, listening with half an ear as his fiancée, Clarissa, recounted the latest society gossip. They were at a stuffy cocktail party, hosted by one of her father's business associates. Marcus plastered a smile on his face, nodding along, but inwardly he felt a familiar restlessness. Life with Clarissa was exactly what he'd thought he wanted. Access to the right people, invitations to exclusive events, the reflected glory of her family's wealth and influence. His career prospects had indeed improved since he'd attached himself to her. Yet there was a hollowness to it all. Clarissa, while beautiful and well-connected, was demanding and possessed a startling lack of depth. Their conversations revolved around shopping, parties, and her complaints about incompetent staff. It was miles away from the easy companionship he'd once shared with Elena, a thought he quickly suppressed. Elena was the past, a necessary sacrifice for his ambition. And darling, Clarissa was saying, snapping him back to attention, did you hear about the Sterling Industries situation? Apparently, old Arthur Sterling finally kicked the bucket. Marcus frowned. Sterling Industries, the tech conglomerate, huge company. Exactly. And the most fascinating part, Clarissa leaned in conspiratorially, her eyes gleaming, is the heir. No one knew Arthur even had any living relatives left. But apparently, a secret granddaughter has emerged out of nowhere. Inherited the whole thing, billions. Marcus raised an eyebrow, intrigued despite himself. A secret granddaughter? Really? Where did she come from? Nobody knows. Clarissa exclaimed dramatically. Some say she was hidden away in some village. Others say she's been living abroad under a different name. All anyone knows is that she's young, completely unknown, and now arguably the richest woman in Nigeria overnight. Can you imagine? Billions, Marcus murmured, the number sparking his avarice. He pictured some naive village girl, suddenly thrust into unimaginable wealth, likely clueless and easily manipulated. Someone's going to have a field day trying to get their hands on that fortune. My father says the Lagos business world is buzzing, Clarissa continued, oblivious to Marcus's internal calculations. Everyone wants to know who she is, what she looks like, what she plans to do. They say the lawyers, Sterling Thorne, are keeping her under wraps for now, probably trying to polish her up before they present her to the world. Smart move, Marcus agreed, taking another sip of cognac. He filed the information away. A new, incredibly wealthy player on the scene. Perhaps an opportunity there, down the line. He briefly wondered what Elena was doing now, probably still working her dead-end admin job, struggling to make rent in some dreary little flat. He felt a pang of something. Not guilt, exactly, more like smug satisfaction. He'd made the right choice. He was here, mingling with the elite, while she was nowhere. He dismissed the fleeting thought of her and turned his attention back to the party, scanning the room for useful contacts. The name of the mysterious Sterling heiress lingered at the back of his mind, a potentially interesting footnote in the grand tapestry of Lagos wealth, but nothing more. It certainly had nothing to do with him. The invitation had arrived via Mr. Thorne, a heavy cream card embossed in gold, requesting the pleasure of Ms. Elena Sterling Chikwuti's presence at the annual Starlight Foundation Charity Gala, Lagos's premier philanthropic event. It's time, Elena, Mr. Thorne had said gently. The business community, the press, they are aware of your existence. Hiding away indefinitely isn't practical, nor was it Arthur's way. This gala is the perfect venue for a controlled introduction. High profile, but respectable. And the Starlight Foundation does excellent work. Elena's stomach had immediately tied itself into knots. Facing the board members and executives was one thing. Facing the Lagos elite, the photographers, the potentially prying questions, was another level of terrifying. But Mr. Thorne was right. She couldn't remain a ghost forever, not if she intended to truly lead Sterling Industries. The weeks leading up to the gala were a flurry of activity. Yemi, the stylist, went into overdrive, sourcing the perfect gown, an elegant midnight blue creation by a renowned Nigerian designer that shimmered subtly under the light. It was sophisticated, powerful, yet understated. There were fittings, discussions about jewelry, simple diamonds borrowed from the Sterling family vault, hair, and makeup. Yemi also coached her relentlessly on navigating such an event. Walk tall, Elena. Smile, but don't gush. Engage in conversation, but reveal little. Project calm confidence. even if you're shaking inside. Remember, you are the story tonight. Own it. On the night of the gala, held at a lavishly decorated five-star hotel, Elena felt physically ill with nerves as the Mercedes pulled up to the red carpet. Flashes exploded as the door opened. Mr. Thorne was beside her, a reassuring presence guiding her out of the car. She took a deep breath, remembered Yemi's instructions, head up, shoulders back, and stepped onto the carpet. The noise was deafening, reporters shouting questions, cameras clicking relentlessly. Miss Chiquity, over here. Is it true about the inheritance? What are your plans for Sterling Industries? Elena, give us a smile. She managed a polite, neutral smile, letting Mr. Thorne handle the brief, non-committal statements to the press before they were swept inside. The ballroom was breathtaking, a sea of glittering chandeliers, elaborate floral arrangements, and Lagos high society decked out in their finest attire. Heads turned as she entered, a ripple of whispers following her progress. She could feel hundreds of eyes on her, curious, assessing. It took all her willpower not to shrink away. Mr. Thorne expertly guided her through the initial waves of introductions: politicians, industry titans, society doyens. People greeted her with varying degrees of warmth, curiosity, and thinly veiled calculation. She shook hands, murmured polite greetings, her Yemi-coached smile firmly in place, while her heart hammered against her ribs. She saw Mr. Adebayo, the COO, and Mrs. Abra, the CFO, across the room, watching her with unreadable expressions. She gave them a brief nod, projecting a confidence she didn't entirely feel. Tonight wasn't just about society. It was about signaling to her own company that she was ready to take her place. Despite the nerves, a small part of her couldn't help but be struck by the sheer absurdity of it all. Months ago, she was arranging files and making coffee. Tonight, she was the mystery billionaire heiress, the focus of Lagos's most glamorous event. If Marcus could see her now, she pushed the thought away. This wasn't about him. This was about her. Her new life. Her debut. Elena found a moment of relative quiet near a terrace overlooking the hotel gardens, sipping a glass of water and trying to catch her breath. The constant attention was exhausting. She watched the glittering crowd, feeling like an anthropologist observing an alien tribe. It's quite a spectacle, isn't it? She turned, startled, towards the voice. A man stood beside her, holding a champagne flute, regarding the ballroom with an amused expression. He looked to be in his mid-30s, handsome in a relaxed, unassuming way, wearing a well-cut tuxedo, but without the air of preening self-importance many of the other guests possessed. His eyes, when they met hers, were warm and intelligent. It certainly is, Elena agreed, offering a small smile. A little overwhelming, actually. I find it helps to focus on the absurdity, he chuckled. Makes it more manageable. Julian Adeyemi, he added, offering a hand. Elena Chiquity, she replied, shaking his hand. His grip was firm and friendly. The guest of honor, I presume? Julian asked, his smile widening slightly. The whispers have been circulating all evening. Welcome to the Lagosian jungle. Elena flushed slightly, surprised by his directness, but also disarmed by his lack of pretense. Is it that obvious? Only to those paying attention, he said lightly. Don't worry, your mystique is intact. Most people are still just trying to get a glimpse. I hope it's not too intrusive, my saying so. Not at all. Elena found herself relaxing slightly. It's refreshing, actually. Most people have either stared or tried to subtly ask about my net worth. Julian laughed. Lagos society. Subtle as a sledgehammer. Well, for the record, I'm far more interested in what the Starlight Foundation is doing for literacy programs than in anyone's bank balance. Are you involved with the foundation? Elena asked, genuinely curious. I sit on their advisory board for youth engagement, he explained. My own company focuses on educational technology, so there's a natural synergy. We try to bridge the gap between tech resources and underprivileged students. They talked for several minutes, easily and comfortably. Julian spoke passionately about his work, his belief in leveraging technology for social good. He asked Elena thoughtful questions, not about her inheritance, but about her impressions of Lagos, her interests. He listened intently, his gaze direct and engaging. For the first time all evening, Elena felt like she was having a real conversation, seen not just as the sterling heiress, but as a person. There was a kindness about Julian, a genuine warmth that cut through the artificiality of the gala. Well, Elena Chiquiti, Julian said eventually, glancing back towards the ballroom. Duty calls, I suppose. I should go mingle with some potential donors. But it was a real pleasure meeting you. I hope you managed to survive the rest of the evening. Thank you, Julian. It was lovely meeting you too, Elena replied, sincerely. He gave her a final warm smile before disappearing back into the crowd. Elena watched him go, a strange sense of lightness in her chest. Amidst the overwhelming spectacle and the undercurrents of speculation, she had connected, however briefly, with someone genuine. It was a small thing, but it made the daunting evening feel a little less lonely. Marcus hated these charity galas. He found them tedious. The same faces, the same forced conversations, the same desperate jockeying for position. But Clarissa lived for them, and her father had insisted they attend tonight. Networking, he'd called it. Marcus called it purgatory in a tuxedo. He stood nursing a glass of overpriced champagne, feigning interest as Clarissa chattered with a group of equally vapid socialites. His eyes scanned the room idly, taking in the glittering scene. Lagos certainly knew how to throw a party. Then he saw her, across the crowded ballroom, standing near the terrace doors, bathed in the soft glow of a chandelier. A woman in a stunning midnight blue gown, her dark hair styled in an elegant bob, her posture radiating a quiet confidence he'd never seen before. She looked magnificent, ethereal, familiar. His brain struggled to compute. It couldn't be. Could it? He squinted, his grip tightening on his champagne glass. The profile, the set of her shoulders, the way she tilted her head slightly as she listened to the man she was speaking with. No, impossible. But as she turned, offering the man a small, genuine smile, Marcus's blood ran cold. The champagne glass slipped from his numb fingers, shattering on the marble floor with a crash that went unnoticed amidst the ballroom chatter. It was her, Elena, but not the Elena he knew, not the simple, unassuming admin assistant he had discarded. This was a different creature entirely, transformed, polished, poised. She looked expensive, powerful. She looked like she belonged here, more than he did. His mind raced, frantically connecting the dots. The whispers Clarissa had relayed weeks ago. The sterling heiress, secret granddaughter, emerged out of nowhere, inherited billions. Elena Chiquiti, Ngozi Sterling Chiquiti, Sterling. Oh God, the realization hit him with the force of a physical blow. The poor, ambitionless woman he had dumped, the woman he had deemed unworthy of his rising status, the woman he had callously traded for connections, was the mystery billionaire heiress everyone was talking about. $4.7 billion. He felt dizzy, nauseous. He had thrown away a winning lottery ticket. No, he had thrown away the entire lottery commission. He had mocked and abandoned the richest woman in the country. He watched frozen as she conversed easily with Julian Adeyemi. Marcus recognized him, the young tech mogul behind Edutech Solutions. Adeyemi was smiling at her, clearly captivated. Elena looked relaxed, confident, beautiful, a world away from the tear-streaked face he'd last seen in their apartment. Clarissa chose that moment to turn back to him. Marcus, darling, are you all right? You look like you've seen a ghost. Marcus couldn't speak. He just stared across the room at Elena, his world tilting on its axis. He hadn't just seen a ghost. He'd seen the ghost of the colossal, life-altering mistake he had made. And she was wearing couture. The gala ended in a blur for Marcus. He mumbled excuses to Clarissa, pleading a sudden illness, and practically fled the hotel, his mind reeling. Sleep was impossible. The image of Elena, poised, wealthy, talking easily with Julian Adeyemi, burned behind his eyelids. Billions. She had billions. And he had told her she wasn't good enough. The next morning, fueled by desperation and a potent cocktail of greed and regret, Marcus began his campaign. He found Elena's old number. Miraculously, he hadn't deleted it. He hesitated for only a moment before dialing. It went straight to voicemail, a generic recording. He hung up, heart pounding. He tried again, later that day. Voicemail. He sent a text message. Elena? It's Marcus. I saw you last night. You looked amazing. Can we talk? No reply. He sent another. Elena, please. I know I messed up. Badly. I was an idiot. Can you give me a chance to explain? Crickets. Panic began to set in. He couldn't let this slip away. This was his chance to rectify the biggest mistake of his life. He imagined winning her back, the life they could have with her fortune. Sterling Industries, private jets, global travel, anything he wanted. He just needed to get her to talk to him. He started digging. He used his finance industry contacts, subtly inquiring about Sterling Industries, trying to find a way to reach Elena directly. He learned she was now operating out of Sterling Tower, heavily guarded by lawyers and advisors. Getting to her wouldn't be easy. His desperation grew. He called her old friends, Maria and Chitty, leaving awkward messages, trying to sound casual, asking if they knew how Elena was doing, if they had a new number for her. Neither called him back. Loyalty, apparently, was something Elena inspired. Unlike him, he thought about showing up at Sterling Tower, but the thought of the security, the potential humiliation, held him back. For now, he ramped up the texting, his messages becoming increasingly desperate, alternating between apologies and reminders of their shared past. Remember that trip to Oburu? We were so happy then. I wasn't thinking clearly, Elena. Clarissa means nothing. It was always you. I made a terrible mistake. Please, just let me see you. Let me apologize properly. Think of what we could have, Elena. Together again, but this time unstoppable. The silence from her end was deafening. It fueled his obsession. He neglected his work, snapped at Clarissa, who was becoming increasingly suspicious of his erratic behavior. His thoughts consumed by one thing, getting Elena back. He conveniently forgot the cruel words he'd spoken, the reasons he'd given for leaving her. All that mattered now was the money, the power, the status she possessed. He had called her poor, and now he would crawl back to her, begging for a piece of her unimaginable wealth. After a week of Marcus's increasingly frantic messages and ignored calls, Elena decided she couldn't let it continue. His digital haunting was a distraction she didn't need. She asked Mr. Thorne to arrange a meeting, not out of any desire to reconcile, but to draw a definitive line. She chose neutral ground, a private room at a quiet, upscale restaurant Mr. Thorne recommended. When Marcus walked in, Elena was taken aback. He looked diminished. The arrogant confidence was gone, replaced by a nervous energy. His expensive suit seemed slightly rumpled, his eyes shadowed with lack of sleep. He looked desperate. Elena, he breathed, rushing towards the table, his hands outstretched. Thank you. Thank you for seeing me. Elena didn't offer her hand. She simply gestured towards the chair opposite her. Sit down, Marcus. He sat, fidgeting, his eyes scanning her face. Her clothes, a simple but elegant silk blouse and tailored trousers. "You look incredible," he stammered. "Successful. Powerful." "I'm doing well, thank you," Elena replied coolly, her voice steady. She felt surprisingly calm, detached even. The nervous girl who had cried on the park bench felt like a lifetime ago. "Elena, I don't know where to start," he began, leaning forward earnestly. "Leaving you was the stupidest, most unforgivable mistake of my life. I was blind. Ambitious, yes, but blind to what truly mattered." "What mattered, Marcus?" Elena asked quietly. "You, us," he insisted. "I let my career, my stupid ambition, cloud my judgment. Clarissa, she was a mistake, a distraction. Her connections, her father, it meant nothing compared to what we had." Elena raised an eyebrow slightly. "What did we have, Marcus?" "As I recall, you felt I was holding you back, that I lacked status, that I was poor." He flinched as if struck. "I know what I said. It was cruel, horrible. I wasn't thinking. I was under pressure, trying to impress people." He trailed off, searching her face for any sign of softening. There was none. "You seemed quite clear at the time," Elena stated evenly. "You said love wasn't always enough. You called leaving me a strategic move. You said some people were meant for bigger things, and I wasn't one of them." Each recalled phrase seemed to land like a blow. Marcus winced. "Elena, please, I was wrong. So wrong. Seeing you at that gala, seeing how amazing you are, it made me realize everything I threw away. We can have it back. Better than before. Think about it. You and me, with your resources, we could conquer the world." The naked greed in his eyes, the way he spoke of her resources as theirs, solidified Elena's resolve. He hadn't changed at all. He didn't regret losing her. He regretted losing her money. She leaned back in her chair, her gaze steady and unwavering. "Marcus, listen carefully. There is no us. There is no better than before. You made your choice a few months ago, based on your priorities, status, ambition, strategic moves." She paused, letting her words sink in. "You chose your path because you thought I had nothing to offer. Well, my circumstances may have changed, but your reasons for leaving haven't. You still value status and money above everything else. The only difference is now I have them." She stood up, signaling the end of the conversation. "I wish you well with Clarissa and your career, Marcus. Truly. But my life is moving in a different direction now. A direction that doesn't include you." Marcus stared at her, his face paling, desperation turning to disbelief, then to a flicker of his old anger. "You can't just dismiss me like this, after everything." "You dismiss me first, Marcus," Elena said softly, but with finality. "You made your choice. Now live with it." Without another word, she turned and walked out of the private room, leaving him sitting alone amidst the wreckage of his own making. There was no triumph in it, only a quiet sense of closure. She hadn't needed revenge. She just needed to reclaim her own narrative. And she had. Rejecting Marcus felt like closing the final chapter on her old life. Elena felt lighter, freer, ready to fully embrace the future. Not just as the head of Sterling Industries, but as someone who could make a tangible difference. The brief taste of power she'd experienced approving the solar project had ignited something within her. She thought back to her mother, Ngozi, who had chosen love and principle over wealth. She thought about her own experience, being judged and discarded based on perceived economic worthlessness. She thought about the countless other women facing similar struggles, lacking opportunities, not because they lacked talent or ambition, but because they lacked resources and support. With renewed purpose, Elena threw herself into establishing the foundation she'd envisioned. one dedicated to empowering underprivileged women in Nigeria through education, skills training, and entrepreneurship grants. She discussed the idea extensively with Mr. Thorne, who was wholeheartedly supportive, seeing it as a fitting way to honor both Arthur's complex legacy and Ngozi's quiet strength. Elena didn't just want to write checks. She wanted to be actively involved. She worked with lawyers to set up the legal structure, recruited a small, dedicated team, and began outlining the foundation's core programs. She named it the Ngozi Sterling Foundation, honoring the mother whose choices, both painful and brave, had inadvertently led Elena to this point. She spent time visiting community centers, talking to women about their challenges and aspirations. She listened to stories of resilience and struggle, stories that resonated deeply with her own recent past. These interactions fueled her determination. Her work with the foundation also gave her a new lens through which to view Sterling Industries. She started asking different questions in meetings. How were the company's practices affecting local communities? What opportunities could they create for women within their workforce and supply chains? Could Sterling Energy's technology be leveraged for more social impact projects? Her decision regarding the solar project had earned her quiet respect from some, like Dr. Bello, who saw she was willing to look beyond pure profit. Others, like the COO, Mr. Adebayo, remained skeptical, viewing her focus on the foundation and CSR as a distraction from the core business. But Elena persisted, learning to navigate the corporate landscape with increasing confidence, guided by Mr. Thorne and her own growing intuition. She was discovering that power wasn't just about controlling a multi-billion-dollar company. It was about having the ability to create change, to build something meaningful. The Ngozi Sterling Foundation wasn't just a side project. It was becoming central to her identity as the new leader of the Sterling legacy. It was a way to turn her own pain into purpose, ensuring that other women might have the support and opportunities she hadn't, until fate intervened so dramatically. She was building her own legacy, one rooted not just in wealth, but in empowerment. Amidst the whirlwind of running a conglomerate and launching a foundation, Elena found a surprising source of calm and companionship in Julian Adeyemi. After their initial meeting at the gala, he had reached out not with business propositions or requests for donations, but with an invitation to visit a youth tech hub his company supported. Elena accepted, intrigued. She spent an afternoon watching teenagers learn coding and digital literacy skills, their faces bright with concentration and excitement. Julian moved among them easily, offering encouragement, answering questions with genuine enthusiasm. Seeing him in his element, passionate about making a difference, resonated deeply with Elena's own burgeoning sense of purpose. Their connection grew organically from there. They met for coffee to discuss potential collaborations between the Ngozi Sterling Foundation and his edutech initiatives. They discovered shared interests beyond work, a love for contemporary African art, a fondness for spicy food, a similar dry sense of humor. Julian was refreshingly different from Marcus, and indeed, from most people she now encountered. He seemed utterly unfazed by her wealth. He was successful in his own right, driven by passion rather than pure profit. He listened more than he talked, asked thoughtful questions about her opinions, and treated her with a respect that had nothing to do with her bank balance. He knew her public story, the heiress, but he seemed more interested in Elena the person. He never pried into her past, though Elena sensed he knew there was more to her story than the official narrative. One evening, over dinner at a quiet restaurant, Elena found herself opening up, tentatively at first, about her recent, painful divorce without naming Marcus or the specific circumstances. Julian listened patiently, his expression empathetic. "That sounds incredibly difficult," he said quietly when she finished. "To have your world turned upside down like that, and then immediately be thrust into, well, all of this." He gestured vaguely, encompassing her inheritance and new role. "You're remarkably strong, Elena." His simple validation, devoid of pity or judgment, meant more to her than he could know. With Julian, she didn't feel like the billionaire heiress or the former admin assistant. She just felt like Elena. Accepted. Understood. Their relationship progressed slowly, cautiously on Elena's part, but steadily. They attended art gallery openings, explored bustling Lagos markets, shared quiet dinners. He made her laugh. He challenged her thinking. He offered support without being intrusive. It wasn't a whirlwind romance, but something quieter, deeper, a connection built on mutual respect, shared values, and genuine affection. Being with Julian felt like a breath of fresh air, a hopeful counterpoint to the betrayal and calculation that had marked her recent past. It was a new beginning, tentative but promising, suggesting that perhaps finding happiness and fulfillment was possible, even after navigating the wreckage of her old life. 6 months after walking into Sterling Tower for the first time, Elena sat at the head of the long, polished table in the boardroom. The faces looking back at her were familiar now. Adebayo, Abra, Bello, Ease, the rest of the senior executive team. The initial wariness had largely faded, replaced by a grudging, and in some cases genuine, respect. Elena, dressed in a sharp, impeccably tailored power suit, radiated a calm authority that felt less like an act and more like second nature. She navigated the agenda with practiced ease, listening intently, asking probing questions, guiding the discussion towards strategic decisions. Today's key item was a major investment in expanding Sterling Energy's renewable technology division, incorporating some of the innovations from the previously stalled recycling project she'd learned about early on. It was a bold move, requiring significant capital expenditure, but Elena had championed it, arguing passionately for its long-term strategic and environmental value. "Mrs. Abra, the revised projections look solid," Elena stated, looking towards the CFO. "Mr. Adebayo, are the operational timelines feasible?" The COO, initially one of her biggest skeptics, nodded curtly, challenging, "Madam Chairwoman, but feasible. Dr. Bello's team is highly motivated." Elena smiled faintly. "Excellent. Then I believe we are in agreement. Let the minutes reflect the board's unanimous approval to proceed with the Project Evergreen investment." There was a murmur of assent around the table. It was a significant moment. Her first major strategic initiative, moving the company founded by her grandfather into a new, more sustainable direction. Later that day, standing in her office, looking out at the panoramic view of Lagos, Elena reflected on the dizzying journey of the past year. From the depths of heartbreak and insignificance to this, chairwoman of Sterling Industries plc, founder of the Ngozi Sterling Foundation, a woman finding her footing, her voice, and her purpose. Her phone buzzed. A message from Julian, "Thinking of you. Conquer the world today." She smiled, typing back, "Working on it. Dinner tonight." The reply came instantly. Always, the path ahead wouldn't always be easy. There would be challenges, corporate battles, moments of doubt. But Elena was no longer the frightened, heartbroken woman weeping on a park bench. She was Elena Sterling Chiquiti, forged in the fires of betrayal and transformed by unexpected destiny. She had faced down the whispers, confronted her past, and was now building a future on her own terms. She had inherited an empire, yes, but she was also building her own legacy, one of strength, compassion, and purpose. The Sterling era had truly begun, and she was ready for it. She turned from the window, squared her shoulders, and walked purposefully towards her desk. There was work to do,